Okay, so I'm going to make this one relatively brief. There has been breaking news today. Fidel Castro has died at the age of 90. Um, Firstly, the most obvious thing that strikes my mind is what an unbelievable year it's been for prominent figures passing away. Muhammad Ali, Nancy Reagan, King Bhumipol, David Bowie, Prince, Boutros Ghali, the list goes on. Leonard Cohen, Shimon Peres. There really have been seemingly a higher number than usual of prominent people passing away, and it could be that the sort of age that many of those people, not all of them, but many of them are getting to now, they came to prominence in the sort of, let's say, between the 50s and the 70s, which was a time when the celebrity as a concept started coming into being. So that could be one theory, but obviously they weren't all the same age. I actually found out about this on Weibo, the Chinese site, because one person I'm connected with had an unusual caption. They had a picture of Queen Elizabeth II, Jiang Zemin, and Fidel Castro, and there's an X over Castro's face, which of course made me think, well, what has he died? And then I found out so they were all born the same year. That was the point of that caption. Um, I'm not going to say a great deal from what will already have been said across news networks. It is big news. Fidel Castro was a very important figure in the 20th century. He's one of those people who really polarize opinion. As a staunch critic of communism, I'm no fan of Fidel, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Understandably, there's celebrations in Miami because this was a man who, to many Cubans, was feared more than respected. It is true that millions of Cubans held him in high regard, but that's true in any communist dictatorship. In Africa, there were prominent figures like Nelson Mandela and others who praised him, but they were basically putting on blinders to as many human rights abuses. Incidentally, that's one thing I didn't like about Mandela. I have a lot of respect for Nelson Mandela. I believe he was a great man, but one mistake he did make was to blindly praise dictators around the world just because they shared his or a similar world outlook of standing up to the US. And that is true actually of Africa in general. Most African leaders have this sort of um, vision of seeing other revolutionaries as good people simply because they are revolutionaries. And, one day that is really going to be, well, not one day, I believe already is a legitimate question to say you're attacking the great powers, but what about what these guys do to their own people? Now, Fidel Castro brutally crushed opposition. There was very little free speech in Cuba. The press was, like in any communist state, heavily censored. Dissidents were tortured. It was a typical commie regime. Um, so sure, there'll be people with a kind of utopian vision of socialism crying today, but for many others, it will be what it is, the passing of a tyrant. And that's how I see it. I don't think Castro brought a great deal of prosperity to the Cuban people. They may say, oh, well, at least we weren't servants of the US. And that's somewhat understandable because, frankly, in the 80s, the Reagan administration especially was guilty of propping up right wing dictatorships. So there's no escaping that fact. But yeah, that's how I see Castro. And whether this makes relations with Cuba different, I don't know. Obviously, Trump, one of his big things was attacking Obama for his foreign relations with Havana. Trump tweeted, Castro is dead. Now, many people will say that was crass, but he was just making a statement of fact on this occasion. Anyway, that's today's big news. Fidel Castro has died.